Our film begins with Clay waking up from sleep, surprised because his wife Amanda is packing their bags. He learns from her that she decided to book a large house near the sea so they can spend some days there because she feels stressed from work and needs a change of atmosphere. When he asks her when they are moving, Amanda surprises him by saying that they will go today because she really needs to get away from people because she hates them. Then, Amanda and Clay move on with their 2 children, Archie and Rosie, set off in their car. Amanda tells them on the way that the best thing about the place they're going to is that it's isolated from people and at the same time close to the city. Meanwhile, Rosie is watching her favorite show, Friends. Upon arriving at the house they'll be staying in, they are amazed by it because it's very luxurious and big. Archie and Rosie head down to the swimming pool and have a great time, while Amanda goes to the supermarket to get some things for the house. There, she notices a man named Danny buying lots of water and canned food, which makes her wonder about the quantities he's purchasing. After that, they all move to the beach and sit together in front of the sea, taking advantage of the moment that the beach isn't crowded, even though it's summer. Rosie notices a large ship in the sea and keeps watching it, telling her mom she feels like the ship is coming towards the shore. Amanda is very surprised when she looks at the ship because it has indeed gotten very close to the shore. Feeling scared, Amanda and Clay quickly gather their things and run to get away from the beach. By that time, the ship actually reaches the shore and is stopped by the sand. Everyone starts filming what's happening, astonished. When they return home, Amanda discovers that the internet and phone network aren't working, and even the TV isn't working and has no signal. Amanda notices that there are deer near the house, which brings a smile to her face. Afterward, they all sit down to eat together, filled with joy. At night, Amanda and Clay are frightened by a knocking at their door. So Clay, holding a piece of wood, opens the door to find George, the house owner, with his daughter, which surprises Amanda because she didn't know what he looked like since she had made a booking over the phone. George explains then that he had attempted to call them numerous times but was unable to reach them due to a network outage causing the phones to malfunction. Clay welcomes them, unlike Amanda, who is suspicious of them being scammers or a gang. When they sit together, George tells them that the electricity is cut off in the entire city for unknown reasons. That's why they decided to come to their house. However, Amanda refuses to let them stay with them in the house. But George tells her that he came out of necessity and hopes they understand the difficult situation that happened. Clay tries to calm Amanda and reassure her, but Amanda insists on her stance. George then tells her he will return their money because he really needs the house. But Amanda reluctantly disagrees and says that she will report him. But George explains that he didn't ask them to leave, just requested to stay in the basement with his daughter until the electricity comes back to the city. After a long debate, Clay allows them to stay. When Amanda enters the room with Clay, she advises against allowing unknown individuals to stay with them in the house. But Clay finishes by convincing her that they need the house and must help them, even though Amanda is very worried about them. When they return to George, they find he has prepared something for them to drink. But George's daughter leaves in a huff because she's upset with how Amanda is treating them. Then Amanda asks George to show her his ID to make sure of his name and that he's not a fraud. George tells her he forgot his ID at home. As Ruth turns on the TV, they all see a U.S. national security warning saying that all networks and the internet are down, realizing the national security that all networks, internet, and TV stations are stopped because of a national emergency, making them fear that the country is under a terrorist attack. Then, George and his daughter go down to the room in the basement to sleep there, while Ruth is very upset that this is happening to their house and they have to sleep in the basement. The next morning, Rosie wakes her mom up, upset because the internet is cut off and she can't watch the last episode of her series. When Amanda checks her phone, she finds warning messages from the government because of a terrorist attack on the networks, which caused the electricity cut and internet outage. Then she wakes up Clay to show him the warnings, but he finds that the messages have disappeared from the phone. So he decides to look for newspapers to reassure her. Then Rosie asks her dad to fix the TV for her, but he explains that it's a general fault and he can't do anything about it. Rosie gets very upset and goes out to sit by the swimming pool alone, and she sees many deer around her. At that time, Ruth wakes up and talks to Amanda about her concerns about what's happening, and Amanda asks her not to talk in front of the kids about what's happening so they won't get scared or worried. Then, George comes and asks Amanda about Clay because he's not in the house, so she tells him that he went to the supermarket to look for newspapers and see the news, and she tells him about the messages that came to her phone and disappeared. George suggests it might be a hacker or a virus, making Ruth very worried because she's sure something is happening in America or it might be the end of the world. At that time, Clay is on his way to the supermarket, but the location map he's following also gets disrupted, so he gets lost on the way and tries to use his mobile to find any signal to call Amanda, but the mobile doesn't work. He decides to turn his car around and keeps driving, hoping he can find his way back home. Suddenly, he finds a woman in the middle of the road signaling to him, and she's collapsing and crying. He approaches her and opens the car window to find her speaking Spanish, knowing that Clay doesn't understand anything she's saying. He tries to explain to her that he doesn't understand her, but she's collapsing and speaking quickly and crying. He decides to leave her and go because he doesn't know what to do for her and is afraid if he takes her with him in the car, she might be dangerous and hurt him. Suddenly, he sees a plane flying in the sky and dropping large quantities of red paper, making Clay very scared and terrified. At the same time, George is walking on the road with his car and finds houses broken as if they were attacked. So he decides to enter one of them to see if there's anyone inside, but he finds the house from inside broken and messed up. He keeps looking for anything useful and finds a cordless phone and tries to operate it, but he finds it doesn't catch any signal. He then moves towards the sea, and there he finds the remains of a body under the sand, making him shocked and very scared at that time. We discover that this is the body of the captain of the ship that attacked the shore. Then George finds the beach full of people's belongings and the sea full of ships, planes, and boats, and suddenly, he finds a plane in the sky heading towards him. So he runs and uses one of the houses in the beach to protect himself. Then we see Rosie looking at the garden telling her brother Archie about the deer and that they were a large group. And when animals behave strangely like that in groups, it means nature is indicating something is happening or they're trying to warn humans about something. So Archie decides to move with her, and they walk towards the forest, and they find in front of them an abandoned cabin. When they enter, Archie discovers that the window of the cabin overlooks the house they're staying in. At that time, George returns to the house and refuses to tell anything in front of his daughter Ruth so she won't get worried and scared. When Ruth gets up to bring him clothes because he is messed up, he tells Amanda he had a feeling that all this would happen in America one day, and that was clear from the declining curve, and he knows that the cordless phone works with satellites. But it didn't work although it's charged and intact. And he was very surprised while he was talking because this type of cordless phone is impossible not to catch any signal, and the only reason it wouldn't work is if the satellites themselves were no longer working. But Amanda isn't convinced by his words, so he tells her he saw with his own eyes planes falling on the shore in the sea. Amanda smiles at that time, and suddenly, they hear a very strange and terrifying sound, so loud that they can't control their nerves because of it, and it's so intense that it breaks the glass. So, Amanda runs to the forest to look for her children, and she falls on the ground screaming because she can't bear the sound. Then, they all return to the house and keep thinking about the source of the loud sound. At that time, Amanda asks her children to go to their rooms and rest for a bit, and then she talks with George angrily because she sees that they're staying in the house like this without any action might be dangerous for them because of its terrorism. She won't wait to see her family die in front of her eyes. George tells her there's nothing in their hands they can do, but Amanda is very angry and suspects that George knows something and is hiding it. Ruth gets angry at her because of her violence and anger all the time towards them, and Amanda hints to her that she doesn't like or trust people with dark skin. Then, Amanda tells George about the person she saw taking lots of water, juice, and canned food, and tells him that this person knew the world was going to be destroyed, and she saw him when she was buying things from the supermarket before anything happened. And it seems like George knows this person died, and at that time Clay enters and hugs them because he's very scared and tired. He tells them what happened with him and the woman who was collapsing, and he shows them the paper the plane was dropping. It was written on it in Arabic, "Death to America." He translates the language for them because he knows some Arabic words through a game he was playing. So he concludes that what's happening is an attack on America. So Clay and Amanda decide to take their children and escape from the country. George tries to convince them that it's dangerous for them, but they insist on leaving. On the way, they're shocked to find it closed because of the cars, and all the cars are empty and there's no one in them, and it seems like all the people left their cars in the road and escaped. Suddenly, Amanda finds many cars coming towards them driving by themselves, so she tries to escape from them before a car hits them. She understands after that all these cars are being driven without drivers and that someone hacked their system, making them run fast by themselves. They decide to go back again to George and Ruth and stay with them. At night, Amanda sits with George, and they talk together, and it appears that she starts to feel safe with George and isn't afraid of him anymore. Then, they sit together to watch the library and the books in it, and at that time, Amanda finds a record of the song she loves, so she plays it and dances to it with George. At that time, Clay is sitting with Ruth and tells her about the Spanish woman who asked for his help, but because of his fear of her and not understanding her language, he decides to leave her and go. And he tells her he feels guilty for leaving her alone and can't forgive himself. Suddenly, they hear a sound in the swimming pool, so Ruth goes to see the source of the sound, and they're shocked when they find a large group of flamingos. Suddenly, they hear again the same loud sound, and this time it's louder, and because of it, the lights in the house explode, and the birds get scared and fly away, and the glass windows break. Then, Clay and Amanda sleep with their children on the same bed because they're terrified of what's happening. At that time, in the grave, Ruth is scared and worried about Amanda and her husband and children because she sees their behavior as very strange, and she tells her father she can't trust them. So, George takes her in his arms and reassures her. The next morning, Amanda wakes up and finds Rosie not next to her, and Archie wakes up at that time and finds his teeth falling. So Amanda and Clay are shocked by what's happening and call Clay to see what's happening and act. Then, Ruth tells them that what's happening to Archie is surely because of a disease or epidemic, and they must go to the emergency room. George tells Amanda that the person she saw collecting water, juice, and food in crates at the supermarket is named Danny, and they know him because they are old friends. He thinks of going to him with Clay and taking Archie with them because he might have medicines and antibiotics that could help Archie until they find a hospital. At that time, Clay comes in very tense and tells them he can't find Rosie anywhere and search for her everywhere in the house and in the garden, but still can't find her. So, Amanda quickly goes out of the house to look for her, and Clay moves with Archie and George to go to Danny. At that time, Ruth asks her father not to leave her alone, so George assures her she'll be fine in the house, and he promises her he'll return to her within exactly an hour. Then he hugs Ruth and asks her to be brave and not to be afraid. Then, Ruth goes to the forest to look for Rosie with Amanda, and they enter to sit in the cabin in the forest, and Amanda is very sad because she can't find her daughter. And she suddenly gets angry at Ruth and tells her she wants to leave from here with her family to get away from her and her father. So, Ruth leaves her angrily and realizes that what's happening now is happening all over the world, and they're all the same, and she asks her not to upset her again and to talk to her nicely. And she knows that she's also scared for her father and for her mother who's traveling, and she doesn't know anything about her. And it's not only her who's scared for her children and husband. Ruth cries at that time because she's scared she won't see her father and mother again. Then Amanda asks for pardon from Ruth and tells her that people deal with each other like that. And maybe she becomes like them without feeling, and she doesn't like to be like that. Suddenly, they hear a sound of something moving around the cabin, so they find it's the deer wanting to attack Ruth. So she gets very scared, but luckily Amanda enters to protect her, and starts shouting with her hands and screaming to scare the deer until the deer gets scared and run away. Then, they see explosions everywhere, and the country is burning. At that time, George, Clay, and Archie reach Danny, and George and Clay knock on the door, leaving Archie in the car, but Danny talks to them from the window and asks them to go away and leave his house. So, George and Clay listen to his words, and they go to stand far from the door of his house and ask him to help them and give them medicine if he has any, and they tell him that Archie, Clay's son, suddenly all his teeth fell. So Danny tells them that this is surely because of the loud sound that suddenly comes because this happened in Cuba a while ago, and they called it then microwave weapons because it produces radiation like it's radiation, and at that time, a large group of people's teeth fell, so they're surprised by what Danny is telling them because it's the first time they hear it. So, Danny mocks them and lets them know that people must listen to the news well to understand what's happening around them, and that the Russians asked for their employees to return from America as soon as possible. But no one cared or paid attention to something like that, and he signals to them that he won't give them any of the medicines he has because he stored them for a time like this. So, Clay takes out all his money and bank cards to give them to Danny in exchange for helping his son, but Danny completely refuses and threatens them with his weapon. So, George also takes out his gun and threatens Danny, and at that time, Clay tries to calm them both down, and Danny agrees to help his son and considers him one of his children. So, Danny decides in the end to accept the money and give them the medicine, and he tells them that he's sure that those who did this are the Koreans or the Chinese, so he shows them the paper he has that's written on it in Arabic, "Death to America," and they suspect they're Iranians. So, Danny mocks them and tells them that before all this happened, he heard from a friend of his in San Diego that planes dropped paper like that on them but in Korean, and because America made many enemies with many countries, it's possible they all united against it in revenge. So, George and Clay are scared at that time by his words, and when they get in the car, George tells Clay he knows someone who works in the defense sector in the army and told him once that there's a program that really worries them, consisting of 3 stages that bring down the country and the government in a moment. The first stage is isolation through disabling communications and transportation means, and its goal is to make the target deaf, mute, and paralyzed as much as possible. Then comes the second stage, which is chaos with terrorism, secret attacks, false information that makes the target suspect that what's happening is because of terrorism, and at that time, people from fear will turn on each other and become enemies. And here comes the third stage, which is the coup and civil wars, and this program is considered one of the strongest war programs capable of destabilizing any country's stability. Then, we see Rosie sitting in one of the houses she found when she got lost, and she's eating and drinking everything because she's very hungry, and she finds that the house has a basement and is well equipped and secure, and there's a TV and videotapes. And what makes her very happy is when she finds a tape of the last episode of her favorite series, Friends, and she plays it. So that is how the first season of the movie ends. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification, and thank you for watching.